The parliament of this country, this parliament, made lawful what they used to call illegal combinations, trade unions, and the birth of the trade union movement contributed to the birth of democracy. That was 1940. In 1950, this country experienced universal adult suffrage. And if we demonstrate the impact of that event to our young people, let the young people be aware that men won elections in this country by receiving 100 votes. And that was the state of a place that did not enjoy democratic tradition. I go to 1966, self-government, independence, as a pivotal moment in the making of this democracy. But I skip 1961 and I come back to 1961 because, Your Honor, it continues to be my position that 1961 was the most revolutionary moment in the making of this democracy. There will be no personal offense taken when I say to you, sir, and to this country, that this budget comes at a time in our history of what appears to be tyrannical rule. And therefore, the budget must reflect that tyrannical rule. And I say to you, Your Honor, that quite often in life when we cannot make sense of the events around us, we create a myth. And we create that myth to ward off the fear and the uncertainty that we feel when we do not understand the events around us, even the political events around us. We feel that need to create a myth, a false idea, a false belief, the myth. And somewhere I did read that when we fail to understand the events around us, when we cannot reconcile phenomena, where we stand in the midst, and we feel afraid and we feel uncertain, we create a myth. A myth gives us psychological comfort. It tells us that we are in a zone of safety, except that we are often in that zone of safety, but we rest our comfort on a myth, on a false belief, a false idea. I want to suggest to this country that the most pervasive myth across this country is the myth of democratic government. It's the myth of good government. I want to suggest to this country, even in this parliament, that the idea of good government is a false idea. The idea of democracy is now a false idea. And it may seem to be a very harsh statement. I acknowledge God when I started to make this speech. I have come here this afternoon to tell the truth. And some of those truths are going to be unvarnished truths. And they will not be offensive truths, but they will be unvarnished truths. Because this country, at this juncture, at this point in time, in the midst of all that this country is experiencing, it is the virtue of truth that has abandoned public life. I told you that I mean no personal offense. My discourse this afternoon rests in objectivity. And I want to say to you, Your Honor, that a very dangerous statement was made in this democracy, becoming a tyranny, when the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast uttered the words dialectally, but I will not resort to the dialect. Give me the vote and watch me. Give me the vote and watch me. And that was not within democratic traditions. Demos, kratos, the Greek combination of words. Demos, the people. Kratos, rule by the people. Democracy is not born of egocentricity. Give me the vote and watch me. When the people of this country ought to have been told, give the party the vote and watch the party. That is what the people of this country ought to have been told. And so you have, Your Honor, no personal offense, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help us God. And then a few years later, another statement was uttered. In an equally informal setting, all big works got to come through me. So that when I say to you, Your Honor, and when I quote Plato, show me a democracy, and I will show you a tyranny in the making. And I listened to the Honourable Member for Christchurch, East Central yesterday, and even he, the Honourable Member, made some utterances within his written speech that gave deference to the idea that one person not only ruled the party, but one person ruled the country. And I say to the people of this country, I say to the people of this fair land, I say to the people in this democracy, that that is not democracy. The people of this country have observed the trains in government. These are serious words. I seek no personal favor. I seek no affection across the aisle. My only search is that God will protect this country and restore this country to the safety of its democratic traditions. I have, in public places prior to this moment, referred to the scourges that are visited upon this democracy, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I used to say that there are the 5 horsemen of our political apocalypse. I have added a 6th horseman within that rampaging group of animals, speaking metaphorically, of course. And I say that they all begin with the letter C, and that is for ease of memory. And I know that the people in this country will agree with me when I say that crime Thank you very much. Crime is the most dangerous and the most omnipresent of those horsemen that are marauding across what used to be this fair democracy, now a tyranny in the making. Last night, Your Honor, let me confess to you, I went into moments of doubt, and as a mere child under God, even fear. And I feared that I would bring some personal offense to my audience, and that is to say, my immediate audience. But the people of this country expect their leader of the opposition, if he claims that he is in a party that is an honest voice for the people, I must then not be afraid to say that there is evidence of corruption in this government, in this country. And that is not to be personal. That is to understand that corruption involves the abuse of power. And that abuse of power is not always for financial gain, but it gives advantage in an unjust manner. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. The people sent me here. I have a job to do and I intend to do it. And I say to you, Your Honor, that the third scourge that visits this country, cost of living. There is no man, woman, nor child in this country unless that human lives a life of absolute comfort, luxurious comfort, opulence even. There is no middle class or working class human being in this country that does not understand that cost of living is tearing lives to shreds and reducing the dignity of families. And if there's a fourth C, it is fairly obvious to all of us who were born at the time that I was born, and those who were born even after I was born, and before, that now understand that we reside in a culture of moral decay. And it hurts. It absolutely hurts, Your Honor, when we see the youngest of our school children engaging themselves in ways publicly that our precious little children never engaged themselves before in your beloved country. And so, Your Honor, I come to you this afternoon and I say to you that this democracy that I have shown you, now a tyranny in the making, is ravished by a culture of moral decay that afflicts the lives of the youngest among us. I must not be afraid to tell the truth. I must not be afraid to tell the truth. If I am afraid to tell the truth, I forfeit the right to hold this distinguished office that I hold. And I will not betray the demands of this office. Even in the face of obvious disappointment, I must not betray the mandate that comes with this office. My purpose here this afternoon, my purpose here over the last year has not been to engage in the orgy of self-congratulation that exists, obviously exists, within the members of this government. Let no man nor woman take it personally. I am here about the business of the people. I come to the fifth of the scourges that are on obvious display in this country. Constitutional malaise. And I will only say at this time that the people of this country were told in 2021, on November the 30th, that this democracy had now transfigured itself into a parliamentary republic. And 4 years later, we are weighted under by a Westminster Constitution, a Westminster Constitution that existed in this country since 1966. The people will be told by this lawyer that there is a fundamental difference between a Westminster Constitution and a Republican Constitution. There is a fundamental difference between a monarchy, which Barbados was up until November the 30th, 2021, and a republic. I have no difficulty with teaching moments. I will not recognize a lawyer in this parliament, and this is not to be boastful. That is of my experience. I defer to the economists, the good dentists, the doctors, good doctors too. I defer. But God has given me but a little light. And it will not be concealed under any bushel. Not today. Perhaps on any other day. Perhaps on any other day. But I am saying to the people of this country that we sit awkwardly as one of the few countries in this world, if not the only country in this world, claiming to be a republic, but with a Westminster Constitution directly inherited from Britain, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And there will be no personal offense taken when I meet the demands of my mandate to say that the six of those marauding horsemen is a crisis of competence in government. And these scourges all conspire to distort our concepts and precepts of what is good government and what is good governance. Since government is structural and governance is based on principles. And those scourges are conspiring to ruin this society into which I was born. This democracy that was in the making, and this democracy that became complete, and this democracy that now suffers degeneration into tyranny. They're not kind words. They are not kind words. But must I only be a nice man, whatever that is, and come here this evening and add to the myth that pervades this country? The myth that we have good government. And I say to this parliament, lest it not be known that there's a disquiet across this country. There's a groundswell of discontent across this country. And I'm not here to advise the government, but it would serve the government well, and I'm not interested in the government serving itself well. But if the government made itself familiar with that groundswell, with that discontent that is across this country, this government may come to the realization that all is not well. And that all is not well because this government, by its action and equal inaction, has made this country unwell. And I know there will be the faces of disappointment, suppressed anger even. But my mandate requires me not to be offensive, but to speak the truth for the sake of the people of this country. Their individual lives being destroyed in this country. And I'm going to give some examples as to how individual lives are being destroyed in this country. I'm going to give examples as to a society whose value systems are so much unlike what we have known. Every human being in this country who can claim that he is, let us say, 35 and over, 30 and over, understands that he or she lives in a country that was not the same country in 2000. It's a different country. And for the students of political science, I take those students to the Hobbesian state of nature. The old British philosopher Thomas Hobbes postulated as to man in his natural state, man without government, man without good government, or man without government at all, and he called it the state of nature. And asked to describe what was that state of nature, what was that state of nature without good government or government at all. He said, no arts, no letters, no society. Life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. No arts, no letters, no society. Life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And for the young man whoever he is, let us treat him anonymously. Whether he's 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, who lay on the ground and bled to death by gunshot. His life resembled and approximated that of that Hobbesian man in that state of nature. He dies at the age of 18 on the raw earth, and his life was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and above all, it was short. And will any member of this parliament deny that there are young men and there have been young men in this country for whom that has been their experience? No arts, no letters, no society. Life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And it ends. And there are those who will tell us, well, the government did not shoot him. And they're correct. The government did not shoot him. So as a matter of law, you cannot say that the government caused his death. But you also cannot say that the government may distance itself from responsibility for that Hobbesian state of nature. And that is where this country is today. And if I paraphrase Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, these are not the best of times. Maybe these are even the worst of times. And I come here every week and I hear about a lost decade. I hear a lot about this lost decade. And the state of life in this country now brings us to a point at which we may begin to feel that we may replace that O with an A, and this is feeling like the last decade. That we will occupy this earth. It has never been like this It has never been like this, where men and women cannot leave home at night, and if they can, they will not. We used to be afraid of the night. The young people are now afraid of the bullet. And it can visit at any time. And will this government tell me that it has no responsibility in returning this country to its traditional peace? Will this government say that? And if this government says that, it forfeits the right to call itself government. And the poet Martin Carter says, "This is the dark time, my love. This is the dark time." I give a personal testimony here. A personal testimony. Last year, when I came to occupy this immediate space, and I delivered myself of my reply to the budget, I was unprepared. Not for the task. I was prepared for the task. But I was unprepared for the assault. I could not believe it. I stood up in this parliament and spoke in my capacity as leader of the opposition, and I thought that I was cordial. And it was not vanity that returned me to the recording. I wanted to be certain that I was cordial and polite and friendly even. And I was unprepared for the assault that began on the night that I finished my reply. I remember some of the things that were said. Even now, they're still etched in this consciousness. I remember. And I took up my bag and my books, and I returned from whence I came. And on the way, I heard some of it, and I changed the station. There are 29. The Prime Minister boasted, the Honorable Prime Minister boasted a few weeks ago, I have 29. I have 29. That night, I was painfully aware of the numbers. And I was painfully aware of the assault on my character. But I am not seeking sympathy. And it is not my style nor my content to lower the standard of debate in this House to exchanges of assault on the characters of my colleagues. Even this afternoon, I came and I said, "Good afternoon" to my parliamentary colleagues. That is how I was taught. That is how I was brought up. And I believe that that is how most of us were brought up. And I have no intention of making any departure from those sacred values that forged my early beginnings into this man. Over the year, since I delivered of myself of that budget reply, I have met an intolerance to criticism. That this government takes the position that it will not be criticized. And I say it and I hear and I watch and I observe the self-congratulation and every trifle, every bit of political trivia is met with thundering noises from the desk. Does not intimidate me. and I've said it before and I'll say it again, does not intimidate me. I have said before and I'll say it again. My job is to scrutinize, analyze, criticize, and if necessary, chastise. And I believe that I've managed to do it without any assaults on the character of any of my colleagues in here. Not my style, not my content. The word parliament derives from the French word parlement, a place of speech, not a place of abuse. But even I was surprised. Between 2018 and 2022, I did not hear it. Did not hear it. Between 2018 and 2024, I did not hear it. And these assaults, these personal assaults with nefarious mendacity, I'm choosing my language carefully, because if I use the other word, they may be assaulted by that nefarious mendacity. It seems that some members of the government may have thought that my right to oppose the government was exploding that myth that this was infallible government. If I were before court, I'd say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not infallible government. But I was met with that violence. It was not physical, it was verbal. The Guyanese poet Martin Carter, in paying tribute to the fallen comrade Walter Rodney, wrote, just a few hours before his burial, assassins of conversation, they buried a voice. Assassins of conversation, they buried a voice. This parliament, on occasion, and members of this parliament on occasion, have constituted themselves to amend that poetic line. And it has become assassins of character. And I add and reply to them, but they will not bury my voice. I will be unchanging in my mandate to scrutinize, analyze, criticize, and when necessary, chastise. I am not a member of this government. That became clear to the people of Barbados, and that became clear to the head of state of this country in February last year. Why is it not clear to this government that I am meeting my mandate, my constitutional mandate, in opposition to a government which I say today in this precious land, it is not a good government. It is a government that has betrayed the interests, the rights and the entitlements of the majority of people in this country. I know it is not easy to hear that. Can't be easy. Can't be easy to have a myth exploded. But you know, Your Honor, this is public office that I occupy, and I respect it. Too many of us believe that public office is private property. And too many of us believe that there's some natural entitlement to that public office. Ladies and gentlemen of the Barbadian jury, here and in the diaspora, public office is precisely that. It is public. You serve at the will of the public. And if you have a belief in higher beings, you serve under God. And it is with that consciousness that I come to this office. And I do so, I serve with a sense of honor. And not only do I serve with a sense of honor, thanking the good people of Barbados, thanking the framers of the Constitution that I had the right to do what I did last February with no regrets. It is with that sense of honor that I also do so, that I also serve with a sense of duty. And it is my duty, under the Constitution of this country, to oppose the government. And not to oppose for the sake of opposing, but to oppose constructively. I remember every debate in which I participated in this assembly over the last year. And I can look members in their eyes and remind them that on occasion legislation has come to this Parliament. And I have said, Your Honor, I agree with it. I can name the bits of legislation. And that is evidence of my commitment to a constitutional office. That is evidence of my commitment to my duty to serve this Parliament and to serve the people of this country. And there are times when in doing my duty, I will oppose. Not for the sake of opposing, not for the sake of enmity. I seek no enmity. Not at my age. The young people know that when you reach a certain age, you look back and you recognize the consequences of fractured relationships, relationships that were fractured unnecessarily. But I have a job to do. I have a job to do. And if anyone takes any personal offense that their policies, in my opinion, in my judgment, are inimical to the best interests of the people of this country, are inimical to the best hopes and aspirations of this country, if there's any doubt that I will oppose it, I will oppose it. And I will do so on principle. I will do so on principle. I began, Your Honor, by telling you that I will tell the truth. And I want to say to the people of this country something about this Parliament and something about public life and something about parliamentary life. I saw some young people around here during the estimates. I think some of them returned yesterday. And humanity is so beautiful when humanity is young. They can be taught. And teaching is one of the most uplifting experiences. And they came and they spoke to me. And in the next conversation, I want to say to them, if they're aspiring parliamentarians, that there is a difference and that they must recognize the difference between objective and legitimate political commentary and personal abuse, which associates itself with the desire to assassinate characters. And I don't mind repeating that the things that I heard in here last year simply because I opposed the government on behalf of the people of this country were a quality of character assassination that I did not expect in a parliament. And it came from persons who will tell you today that I have not responded. some of the most dangerous untruths. The most dangerous untruths, and I don't mind that those untruths, I saw them repeated on social media. I saw them repeated on social media. But there's an American writer now dead called W.E.B. Du Bois. You know, he wrote this at the age of 91. I told you that humanity is so beautiful when young, and even more beautiful when old. And at the age of 91, he asked 4 questions. The first was, how does integrity face oppression? How does integrity face oppression? The second question, what does honesty do? Honesty do in the face of deception? The third question, what does decency do in the face of insult? And the fourth question, how does virtue meet brute force? And the young people want an answer from me to those questions. And the young people of this country may even want answers from all the 30 members of this assembly in response, in relation, I beg your pardon, to those 4 questions. How does integrity face oppression? And I say to the young people of this country, remain a person of integrity all the same. And in response to the second question, what does honesty do in the face of deception? Remain honest all the same. And the third question, what does decency do in the face of insult? Remain decent all the same. And how does virtue meet brute force? Remain virtuous. Be men and women of courage all the same. It is courage that is the most enabling of the virtues. I admitted that last night I had some fears as to the content of my speech. Who would I offend? Until I reminded myself, there's no personal offense to be taken from any speech I have made in this parliament between 2018 and the present. I have been principled and I have been objective. Principled and objective. Let us, in this Democratic Labour Party, which I have the honor to lead, the men and women of integrity all the same. I come as a representative of the Democratic Labour Party, a party with a strong history and a tradition of integrity in government. Let us be honest all the same. Let us be decent all the same. And let us be courageous all the same. And when those of us who have been raised in a certain tradition reach back into the crucible of our early experience, we will rediscover and discover that person who never really left us. You know, the old people knew what they were doing. They knew why every Sunday morning they were exposing our lives to religious tuition. They knew why. And the evidence of what they did is contained in the contemporary experience of our young men who lie dead in the streets. Never said a prayer before meals. Grace before meals, we used to call it. Never went on their knees and said a prayer at night. Never. But this is the tradition in which I was born. The Muslims give tuition to their youngest child in the Quran from very early years. And we, within the Christian tradition, must never be ashamed to do it. I am a sinner, Your Honor. I am a sinner. I am no paragon of virtue. But I am a child with a beginning that taught me, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. I hear it being repeated. There's a voice on the other side repeating it, which indicates to me that I am not in that tradition alone. And it is that verse, those two verses, Proverbs 3, verse 5 and verse 6. That influences my experience. This has not been a difficult year. This has not been an easy year, I beg your pardon. This has not been the best of times. Sometimes it has felt like the worst of times. The night I delivered my reply to the budget, it's not a good night. It was not a good night. The most vile assaults on my character I endured. I will maintain my integrity all the same. I'll be honest all the same. I'll be decent all the same. And I will have courage all the same. And I will have courage to speak the truth. Government, I have come today to speak the truth. And I have always commended to the people of this country that politics for me is not about celebrity status. I do not pursue celebrity status. I pursue service. And in pursuing that service, I am guided by Philippians 2:3. I've said this before. I said it on the platform of the honorable member who spoke yesterday. I said it at a meeting in Wharton that in my political service, I am guided by Philippians 2:3. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility, put others before yourselves. So that this mission is not personal. This mission is for the Democratic Labour Party, and above that, this mission is for the people of Barbados. I will scrutinize. I will analyze. I will criticize. And believe me, where chastisement is due, I will chastise. This budget yesterday was presented by a junior minister. Curiously, very curiously, the people are asking why. The answer is beyond me. The answer is beyond me. And I can come up with all kinds of theories, as the public has. I've heard them in casual conversation. You visit social media and you hear all kinds of reasons advanced. Has the government reached its point of fallibility? When the junior minister, in the presence of the Honorable Prime Minister, for the first time in 7 years, is on this significant occasion. This is a significant occasion within the political culture of this country. There is no parliamentary day that is as significant as Budget Day. I would not accuse the honorable member for Christchurch East Central for having lowered the prestige of the undertaking. He did not. Because I have said to him in this parliament, without fear, that I consider him a competent economist. I have said that. And if that is bad partisan politics, I'm sorry. I've listened to him. He comes over as a man who is serious. So I'm not going to accuse him of having lowered the occasion, or reduced the prestige of the occasion. Honorable member for Christchurch East Central, I respect him. I respect him, and I see him as the member on that side who has demonstrably the best work ethic. He is the workhorse out there. So I'm not going to visit this country. I'm not going to visit this country by making any assault on him professionally. If I thought he was a good economist when I was over there with him, I still think that he is a good economist now. What he does not have with him is a good report. So even good economists give bad economic reports, and this economic report yesterday attracts a failing grade. A failing grade. But the honorable member's appearance here yesterday further exposes the infallibility of this honorable Prime Minister. What is so new and so different? Is he the boy on the burning deck? Has this moment lost its prestige? Or is it just simply a bad report which fits only in the hands of a good economist who is met with the duty even to give a bad report? This is a failed government. This is a government that is failing Barbados. This is a government that is failing Barbados in terms of its economic management, its fiscal management, its financial management. And Your Honor, I say this in the right opposite, the honorable member for Christchurch East Central. I read it. I went home and I read it. It bears the signature. And that is not the literal signature, but it bears the thumbprint and the print of all 10 fingers of the honorable member. And if there's any doubt as to that, they're personal anecdotes. When the honorable member worked at the Central Bank, for example, so that the honorable member claims ownership of those 149 pages that he read yesterday. I fail you, my friend. I'm not your professor. But the people of this country, by their experience of hardship, by their experience of suffering, all is not well. They failed that report. It is a report that contains distortion, disguise, diversion, and please forgive me when I say mendacity. That's my view. And it is not intended to be a personal assault, my friend. It reflects the experience of the suffering people of this country. That this government has failed to deliver them from the abyss of their suffering. Crime, its nature and quality is unprecedented. And I said earlier, a budget presentation is not exclusively financial nor fiscal, it is a political statement. And the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central demonstrated that yesterday when he reflected himself on crime. So that if it were not a political statement intended to deal with the scourge of crime, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central would not have mentioned it, and he did. I said earlier that corruption involves the abuse of power to achieve improper results. And if anyone believes, having consulted with this dictionary, that corruption means stealing money, I am sorry. Corruption has a far wider meaning. It involves essentially the abuse of power. And I will provide evidence that this government, on a daily basis, and certainly on the times that I come here and read legislation, this government is abusing its power. The cost of living continues to impoverish many in this country. While the high cost of living is imposed on the people, the cost of high living enjoyed by this government is combining to further impoverish the people. Permit repetition, Your Honor. The high cost of living is impoverishing the poor, further impoverishing the poor in this country. I put it differently. The high cost of living is marginalizing the poor and bringing the middle class close to poverty. The high cost of living. But that conspires together with the cost of high living. And everybody knows the habits of this government. Not personal. It is not personal. This is a high-flying government. Literally and figuratively, this is a high-flying government. I spoke of the culture of moral decay, which poses an existential threat to the social order, and I will deal with that before I sit. I spoke of the constitutional malaise, and I will speak later of the crisis of incompetence in government. As one member said, and maybe she said it quite unwittingly, nothing seems to get done. This country is drifting on promises and sweet words from this government. Today begins the trial of this government. And your humble servant is placed in the office of prosecutor. I heard the defense yesterday, and it is not a good defense, Honourable Member, through you, sir. This learned prosecutor charges this government with mismanagement, financial and fiscal mismanagement of the affairs of this country. But beyond that, and more seriously beyond that, we all will not manage well. I got so many messages today, quoting the scriptures, telling me, go and do the work. People called me and prayed with me, Honourable Member, through you, sir, for St. Thomas. People called me and prayed with me today. That is is my experience today. There is a spiritual darkness that has seeped into places where there was once light in this society. On the charge that this government has fostered an environment of insidious corruption, how do you plead, government? On the charge that you have done nothing to arrest the high cost of living, how do you plead, government? On the charge that you and your agencies of state have fostered and encouraged a culture of moral decay, how do you plead, government? On the charge that you have moved this country into Republican status and refused to enact a Republican Constitution, you are guilty, government. How do you plead? The evidence is clear. Is there a statement in mitigation for a light sentence? On the charge of incompetence, perhaps you may also wish to plead guilty with the hope of a light sentence. The people of this country will return a verdict in accordance with the virtue of light, and this government's darkness will not comprehend it. It will come. I believe it will come. I believe it is on its way. I believe the myth of infallible government has exploded. An honorable member for Christchurch is central that may help to explain your appearance here yesterday. A good economist doing a weak job. But even good economists are often called to do weak jobs. I give early notice that I will continue to demand accountability in government spending on overseas travel. I will not withdraw from that. I give early notice that I will continue to ask this government to give account for the many consultants employed by this government across the public service, and that those consultants are undermining the morale of those in the established public service. For one, they're paid sometimes 2 and 3 times and 4 times better. And what are they doing? Sometimes they become ministers, though. Sometimes they become ministers at the expense of those who would not align and therefore resign. In these dark spaces of non-disclosure, this is evidence of tyranny in the making. The people who love democracy also despise tyranny and despotic rule. From sitting. I had no idea that one could become so mentally tired from sitting and making notes. Honorable Speaker, I was tired. And I made several notes as the Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central was speaking. And I thought that it was part of my duty to, as the honorable member spoke, and I remember a light moment when he saw me writing, the honorable member saw me writing, and he said, look, let me slow down because I don't want to speak too fast for the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, and that was kind. And at page 15, the Honorable Member said, the US market contributed the largest increase over 2023. I meet my duty, sir, in reminding the Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central that Americans stay for shorter periods and therefore spend less, and this will attract the attention of the Honorable Member for St. Michael West Central. I've come here to engage intellectually and academically. That is who we are. That is who we are. So when they walking around here saying this is who we are, this is who we are. We raise it to a level of decency and dignity. And we come to a parliament and we contained intellectually and academically. We don't come to curse each other. If you want to do that in the branch meeting when you got 6 people up front laughing and carrying on and throwing the caps in the air, well, do that there. Parlement, French, a place of speech, and implied in that, a place of dignified speech. And I meet the Honorable Member with that answer. That although the American market has improved, the numbers, and I'm going to use the tourism language, the spend may not be proportional to the numbers. But that is for the Honorable Member for St. Michael West Central. He will go back to his tourism planners and he will commune with them and say to them that the boast made in here yesterday by the Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central has not been fully explained for the people of this country. And I will remind the Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central that a restaurateur told me a few days ago, and this is not to disparage the tourists, we welcome them. As I've said before, this place feels different when our tourists are among us. We love people, we love tourists. We love the social intercourse. I say social. And so the Honorable Member for St. Michael West Central will go back and ask his tourism planners to search deeper within the American market. In other words, find some rich ones. Look, we are tourists too, and we are not rich. And we don't expect to be disparaged when we go to other countries. But, honorable members, please find new markets, not at the expense of the existing market, but find markets that will make this economy prosperous. I quote again, the Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central said, and I wrote, never in our history have we had 6 hotels under construction simultaneously. Congratulations, hooray. I repeat, never in our history have we had 6 hotels under construction simultaneously. Here's my answer, Honorable Member, through you, Mr. Speaker. A lot of those hotels under construction are being constructed by foreign labor. What is this doing to the National Insurance Scheme? What is this doing to the prospects for local labor? Because they're being paid less than local labor. And so the local labor is marginalized, he is disenfranchised, and maybe if he's lucky, he can get into Canada. And if he's unlucky, he can always get into crime. This is the dark time, my love. And that is to quote Martin Carter, that is not any statement in personal affection. This is the dark time, my love. I wrote a note here about the downgrades. 19 downgrades. While I complete this sentence, I am going to decide whether I am going to give the truthful response to that criticism of the last government in relation to downgrades. I haven't completed the sentence yet. I'm about to make a decision as to what I should say to this government and the people of Barbados who do not know the secret. I will spare you. You have been so well behaved this afternoon. I will spare you. And I'm not going to tell the people of this country what has been transpiring within the parliamentary group of this great Barbados Labour Party within the last month, 4 weeks. The honourable member for Christchurch East Central looks at me quizzically, and I'm not going to accuse that honourable member of not having an idea about which I speak. I suspect the honourable member knows the truth, but I'm going to spare the government on that one, on the downgrade talk. And that was at page 19. So public, what I could say remains a secret today. I will spare them. I will spare them. They know the truth. I know the truth. Let us keep the truth from our public. And if I hear any bad behavior, they're doing well. Page 20. The level of public debt has declined to slightly above 100% of GDP. Now, Honorable Speaker, sir, I did not criticize line for line, but I moved to page 20. And the honourable member said the level of public debt has declined to slightly above 100% of GDP. Now, unless Rip Van Winkle lives among us, every Barbadian awake knows that this government has been borrowing money at an unprecedented rate. And this government is borrowing money at an unprecedented rate, except that a Minister of Finance, Junior, and other government officials come to the people of this country and tell them that the ratio of debt to gross domestic product is falling. We are increasing our debt every second of every day, of every week, of every month. And this government is coming to the people of this country with this fancy talk. I accused the government earlier of distortion of facts. Honorable member, I'm not the economist that you are. Through you, sir. And maybe you have an answer. And it has never been your style nor content to answer with personal abuse. But I believe you feel it is your duty to give this country an explanation as to what this neophyte in economics just said. I move to page 21 of your presentation, honorable member. And it speaks of a table of borrowings and repayments. I'm no economist, but everybody knows that this government is borrowing money to repay loans. Everybody knows that. But what this government needs to tell the people of Barbados is what about the interest on the monies borrowed? And why are we borrowing? Are we not earning? Because if we were earning, if we were using the monies, the borrowed monies for the projects which we claim is the basis for the loan, we would have boosted our productive sectors, whichever they are. But we hear that these loans, for example, the 25 million was for cricket development. This fella that wanted to play cricket for Barbados, ahead of law and politics, I have not seen a new bat in any of the many clubs, including my beloved Spartan, bought through that $25 million loan. And a time is coming, Honorable Mr. Speaker, through you, when this parliament, when this government will have to explain to the Public Accounts Committee, when you let it function, where that Comey loan has gone. The people of Oistins heard that they got 5 million. They heard so. They haven't seen it nor felt it, but they heard so. But when the Public Accounts Committee is allowed to function again, all these things will be brought to light under my humble chairmanship. At page 22 of the honorable member's presentation, he is quoted to have said, the last time the debt level was under 100% was May 2012. We've lost 3 distinguished historians recently. You don't have to be one of them to know which party was in government in 2012. So much for the condemnation, the fatalistic condemnation of the last government. Let us move to page 23. And the honorable member is quoted as having said, commentators are telling the public that the reserves are too high. Honorable member, through you, sir, I say that is not true. Commentators are not telling the government that the foreign reserves are too high. Commentators are saying the debt is too high, not the reserves. The public commentators are saying that the foreign reserves are high because the loans are frequent, that we are borrowing too much, and that we may pass to the great beyond and leave this burden with our children and grandchildren. I hear that every day, honorable member. So please, please, please amend that statement. You are distorting. He is distorting. The honorable member is distorting what the public is in fact saying. But let us come to page 30. Somehow I wrote it this way. 3 words. Building resilience critical. Building resilience critical. And I made a note that this is a bold statement having regard to the disaster that is housing. But I will come to that in some detail. Let me press on. And this one was the most alarming proposal. And I quote, utilization of up to 50% of unclaimed and undistributed assets, including dormant accounts in commercial banks or credit unions. I am seeing the government, but I want the public to hear me. Whether the government hears me or not, if my interpretation is that this government intends to reach into unclaimed accounts, dormant accounts even, of the living and the dead, and say, I want 50% of that, Has this government now declared itself to be a bank robber? Has this government now declared itself to be a bank robber? Is this government proposing to traverse the banking system, look into dormant accounts, unclaimed accounts, have the discussion? Yes, have it, because I want the answer. And say, I want half of that. Apart from which, it is unconstitutional. And the learned Attorney General, among the things that he whispers now, he will give a legal opinion to the honorable member for Christchurch East Central and say to him, the latter, that it is a breach of the constitutional right of the holder of that estate, the holder of that account, whether by estate or personally, that it is probably a breach of that person's constitutional right to hold private property against even the government, which has now transfigured itself by these proposals yesterday into an official bank robber. The government of Barbados is now robbing banks. Beware! Beware, public! Beware! Page 37. Remember, the NIS is your lifeline. And the honorable member paraphrased the commercial that we all hear. The NIS is your lifeline. I'm going to come back to White Oak. Because what I do here today is a continuation of what I started last year. And I will be consistent. And if the NIS is your lifeline, why did this government take the advice of White Oak to write off $1.3 billion belonging to the NIS, and not belonging to the NIS, but belonging to the poor people of Barbados? Why? What's the explanation? Don't talk about lifelines. Don't talk about the NIS as a lifeline when this government allowed two strangers in the pew. That is the best that I can do for them, because Oinatha said he could have done the restructuring for free. But this government gave $27 million US dollars, 54 million Barbados dollars to two strangers in the pew to deprive the INS, the NIS, of $1.3 billion. And the honorable member for Christchurch East Central, good economist that he is, but with a bad report, says that the NIS is a lifeline. And this government conspired to block the lifeline. You know, that's not all that they did. And not they. I am eyeballing this government. And I am saying to this government that this government, deprived by its policy the financial viability of the NIS. And that it allowed two strangers in the pew to persuade this government, this infallible government, to deprive the NIS of $1.3 billion. There is a professor who wrote an article recently in the papers. I read. And I make certain confessions. And one of the confessions that I make is that I do not know everything. I am not omniscient. And when this debt swap, claim it swaps, I tell you, this government, I have never seen an assemblage of persons so successful in selling words, Sweet words, sweet tasting words, sweet sounding words. You know, when you got to the hawker, you had to buy. Before you tasted the sugar cake, you could smell it. Sweet. When you saw it, it was so pretty. And when you tasted it, you wondered why you took so long. This government is an even better salesperson. Not selling sugar cakes, though. Selling words. Beautiful words, tasty words. Words that smell so good. And so when they came here and talked about climate swaps, perhaps, and this is to be fair, perhaps the honorable member for Christchurch Central and the honorable member for St. Michael South Central, with their academic background, they must have been in a position to teach the rest of us. But I went and I read, and having read, I still, in my humility, confess that I did not understand everything, and that is why I read the professor. And it was the professor who told this country, this region, that arrangement cost the NIS $400 million. It was not said in here. It was not said in here, but it is written by a professor of the University of the West Indies, or beloved University of the West Indies. None of us in here can challenge her. And all of us must be so poor as to do her reverence. And it was she who made the disclosure that climate swap cost the NIS $400 million. It was not said in this parliament. I did not understand it. I did not. Today I do. Today I do. And I do not because of what I read and understood. I certainly did not understand it as a result of what the honorable member for Christchurch Central said on the day in question, because I heard sweet words. And those sweet words touched upon my palate. And maybe even I enjoyed it. Until along came that professor, whose name I shall not mention. I like people to keep their anonymity in here. An honorable member, through you, sir, I am willing to share the article with the honorable member for Christchurch Central, except that I will not share it because good economists read other good economists. And I am confident that the honorable member for Christchurch Central read the article. I have it here. And if he dares to say, I'm not going to call the name. I'm not. I know you're a good economist, and if you, well, I thought good economists read good economists. And if you dare say that you did not read it, you bring your own reputation into doubt. But I will share it with you in the fullness of time. Let us move to page 55. And I quote, the Prime Minister wants to thank the MPs for St. Peter and St. Lucy for their strong representation on this matter. I think we were hearing about the brown water down there. And I paused. And I wondered, but should not the constituents of St. Peter and St. Lucy be thanking their MPs for strong representation. Is that some kind of an admission that nothing is well done unless the Prime Minister knows or participates? What manner of government is this? Your primary duty is to your constituency, not to the Prime Minister. Yes. Who does not know that? Who does not know that he is called a member of Parliament for Christchurch East? That when the Honourable Speaker calls upon us to speak, he does not say the Prime Minister's pick. The Honourable Speaker says, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, you may address me. Your primary duty, Honourable Members, is to your constituent. And when you dare to bring a Republican constitution, the point will be reinforced, except that this country still is to be told what is a Republican constitution. This is a parliament, and when you are in this parliament, you are a member of this parliament. When you are on Bay Street, you are a minister, but you come here as a minister representing your primary duty in this body is to represent your constituency. If you don't know that, I'm going to buy a pipe, put it in it, and hand it to you to smoke it. Page 71. If left unchecked, a minister has a duty to report to Parliament, to give account to Parliament. But the basis of your membership here rests in what your constituents did. They voted for you. So don't thank the Prime Minister. According to the myth of infallibility, according to the myth of supremacy, thank the constituents. For God's sake, thank them. And I know the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central will not do that again, because it discloses much about the state of this government. Page 78. This is the one that really caught my attention. Our mantra, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, you hear what I'm calling him? The Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central was speaking on the issue of crime. And this government now has, according to the Honourable Member, a mantra. Our mantra has been, if you see something, you must say something. Now, what is going on in here? What really is going on in here? And beyond here, what really is going on in this government? What really is going on in a government that has a responsibility to the citizens of this country to safeguard their security against criminal wrongdoing? And how dare this government come to the people of this country and hand them the responsibility in a mantra that says, if you see something, say something. And so the government sheds itself of its responsibility to work not with a peace program, but to work with the police service to ensure that the safety of the citizens of this country is guaranteed. If you see something, say something. So if you see something and you say nothing, the government washes its hands and says, well, you know, we can't get crime solved because somebody saw something and they did not say something. You see the reasoning? You hear the sweet words? You hear the mindset? That this government intends to take responsibility for nothing, including resolving crime. If you see something, say something. And if you see something and don't say something, you then become responsible. I turn to the public. And I say to the public of this country to reject that. to reject that reasoning. I can say what the public sees. The public sees a police service undermined by the government. And I don't say that because it sounds good. I say that on the basis of some scheme around here in which we are rewarding criminality, in which we are bringing men of dubious character and reputation and record into secret places. And this will be no secret. I held your secret earlier, government, but this secret I'm not holding. And the Honorable Attorney General of this country must now tell the people of this country whether some men were getting $8,000 a month to keep the peace. Not holding any more secrets. I held the other one a few minutes ago. Not holding this one. The citizens of this country live under a government that has been inactive. Financial association with criminals. No big words. And the now former minister sat in that place a few days ago and said that sometimes he has a choice between financial assistance and financial empowerment. And he gives the criminals financial empowerment. We heard this in this parliament a few days ago. So a gentleman, and I am going to be unvarnished. A gentleman reports that he is no longer shooting people. And he goes to the minister and says, look, I want some financial assistance. And the minister says, look, hold on. I have looked at you, and my assessment of you is that you should not be getting any financial assistance, but I'm going to give you financial empowerment. And the public of this country is going to ask the question, what's the difference? And the young man goes home and tells his mother, look, they didn't give me the $8,000, but they've empowered me financially. And that is the state, not of play, that is the state of danger in this country. But it has to be a joke. It must be a joke. When, and I repeat, and I am going to put this in the plate of the government on their table every time the opportunity arises, that this government was handing $8,000 a month, to use the Attorney General's language, to gun-toting men. If you see something, say something. That's the government's mantra. A few days ago, I saw something. And I'm saying something now. That this government, under that minister, in that ministry, was empowering members of the criminal community. Your Honor, it gets worse. It gets worse. And I challenged it. I challenged it legally and morally. And a member in this government took me on. And with the emotive historical language, met me with the response, you don't know lick and lock up done with? Yes. Not a personal attack. Not a personal attack. Come, let us reason together, government. And it is wrong to tell the young men of this country that they are worthy of negotiation on behalf of a government to either financially assist or to financially empower, whatever is the difference. And then to add to it the dangerous language that lick and lock up done with. So we not locking you up anymore. Not done with. Come and bargain. But you thought it couldn't get worse? You thought it could not get worse? This bargain that a few weeks ago the minister said, as the killings continued, oh well, those ones that are killing now are not the participants in the peace program. The people of this country can believe it, that this government now has evidence as to who is doing the killing, and evidence as to who is not doing the killing but used to do the killings, and that because of a transaction they have resigned from the activity of killing and there is a new set of killers on the block. So that when I say that this government has lost its moral foundation, I say it in all seriousness. I do. I see a government that is passing weak and toothless anti-crime legislation, including the New Bail Act. Said it in here before and I'm going to say it again. And I'm going to let the people of Barbados know that it is my considered opinion as a senior lawyer in this country and this region that the New Bail Act does nothing that wasn't done by the old Bail Act. And if I go so far as to accuse the government of having done that deliberately, I hope that I'm wrong. But the government in this country is soft on crime. Why? Are there electoral implications? We assessing criminality, or we counting votes? Which? Somebody has to say it. And somebody has to say it in this parliament. And somebody has to say it in the public life of this country. The whispers must leave the street corners and come into this parliament. And it must come into this parliament couched in truth. Are we assessing criminality or are we counting votes? If you see something, say something. I have seen something. I have seen the evidence. So I'm saying it. What will you do, government? We see the emergence of garrison communities in this country. A dangerous emergence. Even police intervention, and it becomes impregnable against police intervention if the state is going to use neutral language, if the state is now entering into negotiation with the members of those garrison communities. I say to the people of Barbados here and in the diaspora, that is the state of life in this country. We have lost our protection. We, the majority of peace-loving people in this country, we, the majority who are not involved in crime, seem to have lost the protection of the state. Because it seems, if we're to take the honorable member at his word, and he was joined by his colleagues, lick and lock up done with. So where's the police? Where are the police in this matter? I will have something to say about the Commissioner of Police being brought into this Parliament 2 weeks ago. I have a lot to say about that. Should not have been here. I want to say through you, sir, to the honourable member, I'm going to leave that alone for the time being. I want to say through you, Your Honour, to the honourable member for Christchurch East Central, that there has been a conspicuous disappearance of any government capital works projects from this budget. Last year, the Honourable Prime Minister came and boasted about the capital works projects intended to be undertaken by government. This budget this year says more about corn curls than it says about government buildings. Where are the capital works projects? Where are the borrowed monies? What are they being used for? While you think of the answer, I take you to page 144. And I quote, "There would be some additional supplementaries on critical expenditure to fuel inclusive growth." I read again, "There would be some additional supplementaries on critical expenditure to fuel inclusive growth." Now, that sentence is futuristic. I'm not sure if the speech was written before last Friday, when this government came into this chamber and added 327 or 29, let's say $327 million to its expenditure over and beyond what the estimates provided for last year. A few days before the financial year is about to end on March the 31st, 2025, I'm going to demystify this for the public. A lot of what you hear, there's no mystery to it. The estimates are estimates of expenditure. As the old people used to say, reckon your money and decide how you're going to spend it. That's all this government does, or any government. You reckon your money and you decide how you're going to spend it over a period of a year or a week, as the case may be. And I am saying that this is an overspending government. When a few hours before the financial year ends, this government comes and tells the taxpayers of this country, look, we want another $327 million of your property, of your currency, to spend between whatever period, between last Friday and the end of the month, which is 21 days away or 20 something like that. Or when the honourable member for Christchurch East Central made that statement yesterday, is the honourable member saying that he's coming back for more? Or was the budget speech written before the honourable member came to this house and got another $327 million in the taxpayers' money? This is an overspending government. This is a government that is borrowing millions of dollars, billions now. But they're showing, they are demonstrating that those millions borrowed are being spent. And they're further demonstrating that not only are they being borrowed and spent, but that they are not being spent on what the lenders stipulated in all cases. The 25 million for Kensington is a prime example. The Public Accounts Committee will meet shortly. And please, members, please do not do to me what you did to me last time. Please allow me to exercise the little power that I have as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. Please allow me that. I don't have any power in here. But when I go up into the Senate chamber as the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, let me do the people's work. And I want The Public Accounts Committee have written to the Auditor General, and I've told the Auditor General that I want a report as to that $25 million that was borrowed for cricket development, and I want it soon, because I want the Public Accounts Committee to investigate where it has gone, and if it went to Oystons, if they sent $5 million to Oystons, they have breached the terms of the agreement, and they have breached the trust of the public that they told that it was for cricket development. Please, members, on that committee, which I have the honor to chair, your numbers are majority numbers. But please, on behalf of the people of this country, allow me to do my work. Please, I beg you. Please let me set the agenda. Please let me investigate hope. Please, please let me investigate Comey. Please, I beg you. I beg you, government. I beg you in your majority numbers. What now must I do? Must I go to the people of this country and lament my own failure as chairman of a Public Accounts Committee? I beg you, please let me do my work. Please. I beg you. At page 149, the minister ended his speech by commenting on settlement. Now, this speech must have been written before the events of the last 3 weeks, Honorable Speaker, because I can't believe that the Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central is so disjoined from political events. He is a technocrat, and I've accused him of being the hardest working member of this government. And maybe he is so steeped in his labors that he stands unaware as to what is happening in Holetown, that the people of this country are in rebellion against that Holetown development, and that is the area of settlement by the British. And that is a celebrated place. For the British, that is a sacred place. And this government, beg your pardon, has taken a position against the wishes of the people of this country. Not only the English, but Barbadians as well. I used to go to something called Holetown Festival back in the 80s and 90s, when life around here was so beautiful and peaceful. And hundreds of people would spend that weekend at the Holetown Festival. Alfred Pragnell would be there, and it really was a wholesome activity. Nobody went down there and fought. Nobody went down there and killed anybody and received an excuse that they can lock it down with so you could kill people and go down home and sleep. And that adds to the sacredness of the place. That in the consciousness of many Barbadians, Holetown is an oasis, a place of peace, a place where the visitor met the local and lived peacefully. The Holetown Festival had that meaning for Barbadians. And the honorable member, who obviously is a very hard-working minister, needs to be told by his colleagues, look, please don't touch Holetown. Holetown is not making us look very good at this point. But maybe he's a highly principled man. And maybe he elevates principle above the political reality, and the political reality is that the people in this country are not happy with this government for desecrating a heritage site. Maybe the honorable member is not aware of that. And if I were his friend, I would visit him in one of his quiet moments and say, look, friend, please leave Holetown alone. Don't even mention it. The mention of Holetown is costing this government much political capital. The mention of Holetown and the fact of the controversy at Holetown could cost this government dearly. It could, but I'm not here to advise the government. Any cost to the government may well, any discredit to the government, the debit margin, the debit column of this government may fall in my credit margin. I have a party now, you know. I have a party now. I'm alone here, but I'm not lonely. I'm not lonely, honorable members. I have a party now. Yes, I do. And it is a party with a proud history. And the ones who are not laughing know that party well. Because they were there and they asked about running, they ran too. If you get me vexed, I can call some names. Not only of those who ran, but of those who in the shadows of the night made applications. Yes, the Honorable Speaker does not allow names to be called in here. And you have been saved by that rule. But if you push me,
I can create an exemption if you want it.
Regathering. You know, we went through an exercise of regathering for 2 weeks. Not regathering, the estimates. I searched through, they told me I can't. Look, I was hearing last year here, man, you know, Thorne can't read the estimates. The boy can talk, but he can add. He can talk, but he don't know numbers. That's what they said in here last year. So I had some help. And I asked my help to go through this voluminous document full of distortion and tell me where the regathering money is coming from. And people of Barbados, we have discovered that this government is separating, parceling out, regathering money across various ministries. Are they hiding it? Are they concealing it? But I can't read numbers. I talk pretty, but I can't read numbers. So I had help. So I want the people of Barbados to know, and I say this in the presence of the goodly gentleman who presented yesterday, that it will become his duty in response to tell the people something about this regathering. Tell the people, if regathering is a culture event, an event belonging to the Ministry of Culture, why you didn't place all the money there? If it is an event belonging to the Ministry of Education, why you didn't place all the money there? But what does it say generally about these estimates when this clever government is parceling out, regathering money between 4 and 5, perhaps 6 ministries? Is it to mislead the people of Barbados? And can the people of Barbados rely on the numbers that I can't get read? So my help has told me what the numbers are. And what my help has not had to tell me is that we don't believe the numbers. My help has told me that a lot of regathering money is being spent outside of what has been disclosed. But my help does not have to tell me that regathering is not an authentic national event, that regathering is a partisan event. It is an event sponsored by the Barbados Labour Party using taxpayers' money. And that is morally wrong. I've heard the Minister of Foreign Affairs in a church service, good to see him in a church, trying to explain what we gathering is conceptually. The sentence is not complete to this day. He said something about love and something about love. That's the part I heard, because it was interesting to hear the honorable member speaking of love. He's a love man. And he was telling the people of this country that it is rooted in love. I think they took up former member for Christchurch West. He said something about love too. So nobody has been able to properly explain, what is this we gathering about? Well, let me tell the people of Barbados what it is about. That there was a launch that took place in London of this so-called regathering. And the logo of the Barbados Labour Party appeared on that advertisement. You see how things come out? Maybe unwittingly. But that advertisement disclosed much of what the government would have wanted to hide. Some innocent person in London told the truth. Some innocent person in London told the truth about the concept called regathering. And we in the Democratic Labour Party say to the people of this country that they will not support what is supposed to be a national event when it really is a partisan event belonging to the Barbados Labour Party, and that's fine. They used to do a big picnic on the East Coast, getting small every year though. And they're entitled to do that. But do not do what are supposed to be national events for the Barbados Labour Party. And if it is for the Barbados Labour Party, do not spend the taxpayers' money. And government, you want to hear something? Every regathering is getting smaller. Even the members and supporters of the Barbados Labour Party are now withdrawing from it. The whole thing is so sinister that the members of the Barbados Labour Party were told, look, don't wear the red shirts. Because if you wear the red shirts, the innocent people who come will know that it is a party event. You know what's the dominant color? Green. The green in the BLP. The BLP has gone green, except for when they come out by Parliament to greet their unhappy parliamentarians. They gone green. Congratulations to the honorable member for Christchurch West Central. He started out green in Barbados and was not aware that his magnificent greening would reach his own party. So they're now green. They're now disguising themselves in green for the purpose of misleading the public that what is a partisan event is really a party event. Have you ever seen so many people in a small place and not a man is in raid? That's unusual. Even if it is not a partisan event, somebody is going to wear raid. But I saw one of the events and not a man had on raid. Not even the honorable member for St. Peter. I believe it has now reached St. Thomas. Regathering is like has it reached St. Thomas? It is like a poisonous snake crawling through Barbados. And it is biting propriety and decency in government. Wherever it is, I don't know where it is. The majority of people don't know where it is, and they don't care where it is because they're not supporting it. It is a political enterprise. It is a partisan enterprise masquerading as a national event. The Democratic Labour Party is asking the decent people of this country to abandon it. Abandon it. It is a BLP event. Do not be sucked into it. with your presence. Leave it alone. So the Green Army, which is an army in disguise, let them gather. The rest of us who are afraid of crime will scatter. I brought along, I'm not making anything a document of the House, sir. I brought along something. Let me leave it at that. You know, immigration is asking visitors to this country if they're coming because of the regathering. Ask this government to disclose the figures from immigration as to how many returning Barbadians have said that they are visiting this country because of regathering. How many, government? People are going to come here in July and August for crop over. Nobody is coming to this country for regathering because we're in the technological age. And those in the diaspora who are probably hearing me right now, as I speak, are being made aware that decent Barbadians are being asked, whether they're B, D, or X, not to support a partisan event that is masquerading as a national event. Masquerade, painted faces on parade, Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber, Phantom of the Opera. It is part of the BLP propaganda machinery. The Honorable Member for Christchurch West Central treated me well. He treated me well when I was over there. Still do. And the Honorable Member came and told me, look, I am greening Barbados. I intend to green this place. And he donated 2 parks. I took him and I showed him, give me a park in St. Laurent in Harmony Hall. And give me a park in Ashby Land. And I did the legal work. The land in Ashby Land belonged to a lady. And I wrote to her, well, not wrote to her, I went to her. I did not steal her land. I've never stolen anybody's land, nor their money. And I went to her and I told her, donate this land to the NCC. You're not losing your what we call seisin, S-E-I-S-I-N. You're not losing your title. You're not even given a lease. What you're given in law is called a license. And it is called a bear license, B-A-R-E, not a bear, B-W-R. And at any point, you can retrieve your land. And she accepted. And I went back to the Honourable West Central with a document signed by the lady, prepared by me. Not only am I a good parliamentary representative, I am a good lawyer. That is all I can do. I'm not a good dentist. I'm not a good doctor. I'm not even a doctor nor a dentist. That is all I am, honorable members. And so I prepared the document using my experience. But that is the long story. The short story is this: that the honorable member for Christchurch West Central came and paid personal attention when he was a better representative. And I said to him, I want 2 benches. And the honorable member gave me 2 benches, or 3. And the honorable member had them painted. And you all know where the story is going. They know where the story is going, sir. They know what color the benches were painted in. And if the honorable member were allowed to interrupt my speech, he would say that those benches were painted either green or blue. I cannot remember. But one day, someone told him change the color of those benches, the paint wasn't peeling, the benches weren't rotting, and they paint the people's benches right. They painted benches in a public park raid. And those who are curious, I was in St. John recently, and the benches in Poland, the Poland woods that used to be green or blue, they are right too. And the people of Barbados are now curious as to what manner of government is this that will go around the country in public places reducing everything to red paint. And they would have heard me say at the beginning of this speech, show me a democracy and I will show you a tyranny in the making. This is tyrannical government. This is government that survives on the basis of propaganda. Propaganda is the lifeblood, the fuel of this government. And this government will not feel that it can succeed unless it can work on the mind of the public and to paint everything red and to associate red with a successful Barbados Labour Party. And then every time you see red, you associate that with the government and you will feel favorably towards the government. But let me tell this government something. The cash registers in the supermarkets are also red. The numbers are also red. And the citizens of this country cannot afford the food. Has any member of this government stood in the line at a supermarket and had the person ahead of him or her turn and say, could you please help me to purchase these groceries? I was at, I'm not going to call the name of the place. If you have tears, prepare to shed them now. I'm going to call the name of the place. I was in Sheraton Center a few months ago. And I walked in and I saw this lady and said hello. Very well dressed lady, very well presented lady. And, you know, when you're doing a good little job, people get to know you. So I said, well, she's just another person who has acknowledged that I'm not doing a bad little job. And I met another friend. And he told me, look, Ralph, I have $120 in the ATM. You see that lady there? He pointed at her, very well attired. This is not a vagrant, this is somebody who carried herself well. He said, look, she just walked up to me and told me, sir, I do not have any money. Please, could you help me? I wish I could call his name. And I hope he's hearing me now. He needs to be acknowledged here anonymously. And he went and took $50 off his ATM that had $120. And he said, watch me now. And he and I are walking to the car park. And he passes by her, and what we do in Barbados, he squeezes the $50 into the palm of her hand. If you have tears, prepare to shed them now. The red benches have not brought prosperity to the hardship that that lady is suffering. The red benches have not brought prosperity to the suffering people of this country. So you can paint the benches red. But the light bill has urgent in red too on the envelope for a lot of the people in this country. And when the electricity bill comes and it has red urgent on the envelope, the people tremble. And government, Your Honor, I am going to come to government's relationship with the Barbados Labour Party before you ask me to sit. I'm going to come to that because I've come here to tell the truth. And I'm going to tell the truth this afternoon. Show me a democracy and I will show you a tyranny in the making. I have dealt with the presentation of the honorable member for Christchurch East Central, you will permit me, Your Honor, to do an overview of this economy. And this will be of particular interest to the Honorable Member for St. Michael West Central and the Honorable Member for St. Philip South. This economy continues its over-reliance on tourism. We have been saying for a long time, and before I came across here, the economists were telling this government that this economy needs to be diversified. A respectable economy or an economy cannot claim respectability when it is driven on one industry, unless it is oil or something. You can live on that and disregard the others. Like a few countries in the Middle East, they've become super wealthy on a sole product called oil. But in this little place, we have to diversify. I know the Honorable Member for Christchurch West East Central boasted yesterday that he has 6 hotels coming up all at once. And one day, he will come back and tell the people what value those 6 hotels have added. And when I say value, I mean real value, value in dollar terms. And while we have focused on tourism, agriculture seems indifferent. And more than agriculture seeming indifferent, perhaps the minister is indifferent. Because 3% of GDP is agriculture. And I said that I'm coming here to demystify for the sake of the public, because I believe that this government knows of what I speak. Gross domestic product is the total, the aggregate amount of goods and services exchanged within the thing that we call Barbados. That's what it is. And of all the goods exchange, goods and services, if you go to a rum shop and buy rum, that is listed as a transaction within the gross domestic product. What is produced domestically and sold, exchanged between parties, between persons. In other words, all that we have, a financial value of all that we have that is subject to barter, exchange, sale, call it what you wish. And of the millions upon millions of dollars, agriculture is 3% in this place called Barbados. When it was predominantly agriculture, it was not a happy place. It was not a happy place. Because we all know that one of the industries, one of the peculiarities of the sugar industry is that it impoverished people. You know who taught me that? Your Honor? I'm not going to say no. But the sugar industry impoverished lots of Barbadians. And so it was a wise government that in the 60s transformed the economy, diversified the economy, and moved away from sugar as a predominant sector and moved to tourism. And there was what you call a happy coincidence, or coexistence, I mean, between the two industries. And there was always that balance. Are we going too heavily on tourism? Are we too heavy on sugar? And so those wise men who created or who completed this project in democracy always guaranteed to this country that there should be that happy coexistence between two industries which gain this country much foreign exchange. We now live in a country that cannot defend its credibility if only 3% of that gross domestic product is in agriculture, and we are around here talking about food security. We talk about all kinds of things. 3 sentences don't pass in here from this government unless you hear about climate change and resilience and ecosystems and sustainability and all kinds of pretty words. I tell you, that's government's biggest industry. If you want a pretty word, knock on this government's house. They're selling cheap, pretty words. But this government is now unable to defend its credibility by having an economy in which only 3% of the gross domestic product is agriculture. Somebody is failing. Somebody is doing wrong. Show me a democracy, and I will show you a tyranny in the making. Tyrannies are not always exclusively political. Sometimes they're economic. Sometimes you have oligarchs. Sometimes you have people who are dominant, not because of political power, but because of financial power, monopolies. Powerful people concentrating their power in financial domains to the exclusion of the majority, who must wait for the crumbs from the table. And that is why the rebellions are taking place in this country. That may well be the origins of Holetown. You may find that Holetown is not exclusively about heritage. You may find that Holetown is also about the loss of opportunity, a denial of the right of access, not only to a beach, but denial of the right of access to national resources. And when people see these large buildings going up, it is not only the sea that they're blocking, but they're blocking ambitions and aspirations. It is psychological, my friends. This is the dark time, my love. Where's manufacturing in this economy? I said earlier, and I'll repeat, in the face of the boast by the honorable member for Christchurch East Central that construction is booming, it is not booming for the Barbadian laborer. I see it. I drive by the projects and I look. I am not a theoretical politician. I go into the highways and byways, not to do mischief, but to observe the reality that surrounds. And one day, this government came in here and acquired lands at Bullins Agricultural Station. Man, and I got up and behaved bad in here. Not the kind of bad behavior that would entitle the speaker to put me out, but I protested. I protested because I felt that too much of our agricultural land was going into housing. And I predicted, I said, no doubt they're going to put high-end villas down there because it was just above the West Coast. And in my innocence, I said, I can bet you they put high-end housing down there. And I was laughed at. And I overheard a voice from the other side say, he doesn't even know that the house has gone up already. And that's what this government is doing. This government is proceeding with its projects and then coming to the people after. That is what Holetown is about, Your Honor. The people in this country feel aggrieved that those negotiations were so advanced and that the people found out all too late. And my friends, government, if you want to believe that you are loved in this country, come take a trip with me Come take a trip. Come take a trip with me. And you will discover the source of the people's anger. They feel alienated by this government. And so I drove down to Bullens Agricultural Station, figuring that I would see agriculture. Figuring that I could mount some protests against the plan to build houses because it came here. By the time I got down there, the houses were up. Houses up. I was leaving Walter Blackman's funeral in St. Peter, and I said, let me seize this opportunity to go into Bullens Agricultural Station and literally feel the soil with all the manure in it, rich. When I got there, Your Honor, when I got there, I saw some houses, almost finished. And I saw a man at the gate. It's like a gated community, one entrance, one exit. I begged him, sir, may I come in here? I discovered that he did not know what I was saying. He's Chinese. He had no idea what I was saying. He's Chinese. And one of my fellow Barbadians came and told me, don't worry about him, you come. But I wanted to speak to him. So I adjusted the speed of my language, and as best as he could understand, like Barbados, or love Barbados. You want to stay or want to stay? The man in charge of the project is a young Chinese man who says that he wants to stay here. I am not xenophobic, but there's something very interesting going on in this country. And the natives, and that is not used disparagingly, that is used in its real sense. Natives, birthplace, navel string in this earth. Born here, belong here. Must now be aware, or must now wonder, if this government is bringing people into this country who wish to and intend to stay here, and if they wish to stay and they intend to stay and the government allows them to stay, when election day comes, what will they do? By that time, would immigration, at the urging of the Minister of Home Affairs, have hastened their status such as to allow them to vote? It would be a wise decision if they voted for me, but it would speak of ingratitude on their part. And let us not be lighthearted about it. Everything for this government has a political implication. And I give warning to the people of this country as to this government's activities under the guise of a construction sector. And I say to the people of Barbados again, if you have tears, prepare to shed them now. We may be driven off this landscape and we may be voted off this landscape if we are not careful, if we are not vigilant. But that, sir, represents the betrayal of Barbadian labor by this government. You will hear me later come to housing, and come to housing more particularly, and the sham and the disgrace and the disaster that is housing, mired in scandal. You will hear me say, sir, that the road repairs that are suddenly being done, all of a sudden, everybody can get a road. Roads dishing out in this country now. The honorable member for St. Thomas was in here crying a few weeks ago. Her tears have dried up. I think Bridgefield is no longer the worst road in Barbados. And all this falls under one's overview of the economy. But you know, the people of this country must be told that this government is constructing roads. They call it a mill and pave. You're milling and you're paving. Beg your pardon, sir. This government has found its way onto the South Coast, where I have the honor to represent, having told me a few years ago, you can't get a road because we have to do some subsurface work to the utility lines. And I told the honorable minister at the time, well, I suppose I have to wait. And they said that they sent 5 million up in Oystins after I crossed the floor. And they also said that they're now going to do the whole South Coast. All the utility lines are now fixed, presumably. But to tell the truth, they have not fixed the subsurface utility lines. And it is recognized by this government that the surfacing of some of the roads in this country is now going to be a waste of money because they have to dig up the roads that have been milled and paved. But of course, an election is coming. And if an election is coming, it is more important to waste some public funds to impress the electorate rather than to do things with financial prudence. Who is the beneficiary? Who is suffering? If you do the whole South Coast as a waste money project, which welfare recipient is denied, there must be some rationality to how you function as a government, to how you spend as a government. It is called financial prudence. But this government is willing to waste that spares money for electoral advantage, and that is another example. Regathering has failed. Let us succeed with mill and pave. Let us purchase some votes while wasting the taxpayers' money on an unnecessary mill and pave program. I beg your pardon, sir? Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the House until 5 minutes to 6.
Question is that this honorable chairman be suspended until 5 minutes to 6. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chairman stands suspended for 5 minutes.
may be departing from us, and I know this Parliament will unite in sadness, and I hope that it is not so. I remember the Intel closure traumatized this country, and I wonder if we ever quite recovered from the departure of Intel, so that I am hoping that those rumblings within the manufacturing sector, manufacturing sector that is foreign, I hope that those rumblings are not true, and I hope that the rumor is not true, and I hope that it is merely a rumor. The loss of revenue is one thing, but the trauma to lives, local lives, would be quite great. And as I said, this country never quite got over the Intel departure. An overview of this economy would mandate that we take a look at housing briefly. The government had hoped that the construction of houses would have done something for this economy, but during this overview, economic overview, I want again to look at the loss of valuable agricultural lands. It comes close to a crime that rich agricultural lands in this country are being excavated down to the limestone that rests beneath the rich soil and permanently turned into housing. And it is not that we wish to deprive anyone of a house, because this country discovers that the housing market, the construction sector within this economy, is not presently serving the interests of low-income persons. So that's one of the other myths in this economy. And the move from agriculture to housing, I will make the point generally, is slowing this economy down, because within the housing sector, Hope and so on, a lot of the houses are not being sold, which is a dent in economic activity, and we've lost the agricultural land. We've lost this product, this sector called agriculture. And that is why, that is one of the reasons that it is at 3% of GDP. Now, it is conceded that there has been some economic growth coming out of COVID, obviously and quite naturally. You are going to experience economic growth. You had an economy that was closed, like all the other economies. And so when an economy reopens, it naturally grows. Growth is natural. But we continue to confront this government with the assertion that a lot of the stated growth is really inflation. It is what you call inflationary growth, that you calculate your GDP in dollar terms. And if you calculate your GDP in dollar terms and you have prices increasing, in other words, the same number of goods, one day valued at $100, those same, with inflation, the same number of goods would be valued or calculated at $120. And what government is doing is that it really is calling inflation growth. And what is really inflation is not growth. And that is why, speaking to the public, the economists will argue that the growth is not real, that the growth is inflationary. And we charge this government with that accusation, that the inflation figures reflect a distortion in real growth figures. And you know, Your Honor, inflation not only distorts growth, but it militates against growth. Because Economics 101, if that is what they call it, will tell you that when prices are high, demand decreases. If a commodity is expensive, it will have fewer buyers. And if it has fewer buyers, it remains unsold, and that results in a lack of growth. There's no mystery about these things. Economists, bright economists, discuss these things in their language. Those of us who are not economists, and those of us who are merely heads of households, we are in our own ways economists too. And we speak English, we understand English, and we have a little common sense. And therefore we will understand these, what they will call phenomena, these events, that inflation will affect growth adversely, that goods will remain unsold, goods will remain unbought if the prices are too high. I reinterpret that, I restate that by saying that inflation distorts our perception of growth. Inflation also decreases growth. And so we reach the point where we condemn this government for distorting inflation rates. I think the government has been telling the people of this country who go to the supermarkets in terror that inflation is at 1.4%. Now, we know that this is not likely the case. They use the term goods of origin. I think that's the term they use, where the goods come from. And if the goods are coming in majority from Canada and the United States, that is going to be interesting over the next few months. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs will become busy over the next few months as he navigates that crisis, that trade crisis between the United States and Canada. It is getting very serious. Yesterday, the Canadian Premier of one of the provinces threatened to withdraw electricity from the United States. So if we think that the only war is or was in Gaza or Ukraine, there's a commercial war raging itself in North America, and it has consequences for us. But let me not digress, Your Honor. Two of our main trading partners are Canada and the USA, and they experience inflation at somewhere in the region of 7%. Now, if the majority of our goods are coming from the United States and Canada, and they are experiencing inflationary growth of 7%, it means that we also, in purchasing those goods, are paying prices at 7% increase. And that when those goods come here, it is impossible for those goods to be sold at less than that 7% increase, unless they're doing philanthropic work, unless there's some charity, or unless they're bringing in things to give away. So it doesn't make sense, really, for the government to continue to argue that inflation is growing at the rate of 1.4%, while inflation across Canada and the United States, where we are purchasing our goods, are experiencing inflationary rates of 7%. So this government needs to visit the people of this country with figures that reflect reality. In other words, figures that are the truth that we have come here to speak today. The government has claimed, I believe, that our growth is in the region, I think they're saying 4%, and that they expect that it will fall this year to 3.5%. Countering their claim as to 4%, we say that those real growth figures are in the region of 3.1%. So that when the honorable member for Christchurch East Central comes here on Monday, yesterday, and says that this is a budget of bounty, there's no evidence of bounty. If this budget is memorable for pedicures, current curls, and an increase on the minimum wage, which according to credible calculations is putting, I think, an additional $1.36 in people's pockets. I am going to get that correct before I say, but it is very, very, very small. The increase to the minimum wage is really contemptuous. It really is contemptuous of the poor people. When you come in here and say that you have a bountiful budget, and there's no evidence of that bounty, that you come to the workers in this country and you say to them that you have, oh, I have increased, the minimum wage has increased. And the calculators are telling us, in some cases, 17 cents. It really is non-existent. And more than being non-existent, it is contemptuous of people's intelligence. It is an insult to people's intelligence. So that there's no bounty in this budget because there's no bounty in this economy. This is an economy that is mismanaged by an overcommitment to borrowing. That is a fact. And that government finds temporary comfort in the possession of borrowed monies while there is little productivity, or while productivity is not consonant with those loans. But as I've said before, government has admitted that the growth will reduce this year. And I hope, for God's sake, that it does not fall realistically below 3%. 3% is not acceptable. 3% does not speak well for prosperity in this country. And so when you use the word bounty to describe the budget, it's another sale of a sweet smelling and sweet sounding word. But the taste that it is leaving in people's mouth is the taste of disappointment. People are disappointed with the performance of this government. And people are now discovering that this government has sold them untruths about the true state of this economy. I referred, as I said, the honorable member for Christchurch East Central boasted about a construction boom. I need not repeat, but in my overview of the economy, the boom is not existing for local labor. Most of those work sites, and perhaps I should use more modest language. I don't want to exaggerate, but several of those work sites have a preponderance of foreign laborers, which, as I have said before, and it is worth repeating, it is disadvantageous and certainly not helpful to our national insurance fund. And they're working for lower wages, and I would imagine that they are repatriating, sending those wages back home. If it were a Barbadian laborer, he would be spending those monies here or saving those monies here. And of course, the honorable member for Christchurch East Central would say S equals I. Savings equal investment. I think I remember a little something. That savings equal investment. So if you put money in the bank, it is not lost to the economy because the bank will lend it out. Worse, the foreign labor is accepting less money and working long hours. And worse yet, demoralizing Barbadian labor. And as I said earlier this morning, and repetition is worthy when it reflects hard truths, that we are possibly losing those potential workers, those workers who have been lost to construction, to crime or emigration. And crime and emigration are two national tragedies, except that crime is the worst of those national tragedies. Who is winning? The government is not winning because the government is failing to meet its obligation to satisfy the people of this country that it is, managing this economy prudently. But the employers are winning. The investors are winning. The investors are paying low wages for high buildings. So while the investors win, the country, this place called Barbados, is losing. And the Barbadian worker is also losing. And the harsh reality facing the Barbadian worker, as I said, is that his only escape from hardship is emigration if he's able, or a resort to illegal activity. And if it is not the violent illegal activity, it is within the underground economy where he must find some means to feed his family. And if it is the overground economy, hardship. And I want to remind this government that this is not a happy country. That a lot of people are going to bed at night unhappy. And they're waking up hungry. And that is a terrible combination of existence. Going to bed unhappy and waking up hungry. And little boys who should be in school are catching chickens, running about the districts of this country, catching chickens, the chickens that you used to see around the gas stations and the car parks of supermarket. Haven't you noticed, government, that they've disappeared? Many of them have disappeared because the little boys are catching them, selling them for $10. And I apologize to the Barbadian diaspora. You did not want to leave this behind. You wanted to leave behind a place that is happier. For your yearly visitation at crop over, not regathering. Please do not come here for a regathering. Come for a crop over. And if you come for a regathering, enjoy yourself. Enjoy yourself. But you're not going to find a lot of Barbadians there. So please come. Come in any event. We want you here. We want you to be happy and we want you to spend some money. But come and visit your families. Don't visit a Barbados Labour Party picnic called Regathering. I digress. And you know, in a commitment to tell the truth, we have to ask something about the prefab revolution in housing. And I don't ask that to disparage construction creativity. The evidence is revealing itself. The evidence has revealed itself in the constituency for the honorable member for Christchurch East, a highly publicized case. And now there are other cases emerging. I've not come here to bury Caesar. And if I try to praise him, I am not finding many reasons so to do. But one, we talk a lot around here about climate change, and we look on with some nervousness at the durability, no pun intended, of the revolution in prefabricated construction. We have to face reality, and I've asked that the honorable member for St. James Central may engage himself in much creative thought. If he monitors that situation between the US government and Canada, and worse, how will this government dispose itself on the United States injunction against countries that have transacted with Cuban health officials? This government talks a lot. Presumably, this government also thinks a lot, because you can't talk unless you're thinking. And we can't see when you think. But we want to hear what you think when you talk. And the time has come for this government to talk to the people of Barbados in the manner that the Vincentian Prime Minister talked to the people of St. Vincent and told them what will be his government's position in relation to that North American injunction against administrations that have transacted with Cuban doctors and nurses. Is CARICOM to mean anything to us? Or does CARICOM mean nothing to us? Is regionalism meaning anything to us, or does it mean nothing to us? Is it a mere convenience? Is it a mere reservoir? Is it a mere domain of petty diplomatic exchange, cocktail parties and tinkling of glasses, and we go back to our capitals and we forget the events of a philosophical weekend when we speak of immigration, of integration, regionalism, and the ideals, and we quote the great writers and the great singers, and it becomes business as usual. It's not for me to come to this parliament and to express admiration for any other government, but you will permit me, sir, to commend the head of the Vincentian government, who has taken a principled position courageously. What is this government's principled position? I have never heard this foreign minister lost for words, nor even this honorable prime minister. What are your words? And beyond words, what are your intentions? Tell Barbadians quickly. Too many Barbadians have had their eyesight saved in a Cuban system that has been, I think in some cases, gratuitous. Only the wealthy, or only those with very generous insurance policies, can afford medical attention in North America. What are your words, government? And more than your words, what are your thoughts? What are your diplomatic exchanges? You can keep that to yourself. But where do we stand in relation to that North American injunction? Come, let us contend. Come, let us reason together for the sake of this country, for the sake of the people of this country, for the sake of the people of this Caribbean, for the sake of the existence of this Caribbean. Come, let us reason together. No discussion on the economy is complete unless there's a very large discussion on tourism. They may say that I am being too hard on the gentleman. Beg your pardon, sir. They may say that I am being too hard on the gentleman. But many years ago, a Barbadian prime minister said that at the time, a director of tourism had done more damage to the tourism industry than a hurricane. The former CEO of BTMI, he came, he saw, and he conquered nothing except his incompetence. And his incompetence won. He left this country in debt. He came here, and I'm going to try to be mild in my language. He came here with a report card that really betrayed a level of naivety in government that was appalling. We heard boasts about, oh, he was headhunted, and he is the best of the best. He is the best of the best. The gentleman came here, Veni, Vidi, Vinci. He came, he saw, he conquered. And it seems that his conquest was against the best prospects of this tourism economy. I hope that this government will admit to its large error. And this is no personal attack. But how can you represent a country when your language is not the language of the country? You cannot promote Barbados as a tourism product speaking a foreign language. Language is at the heart of culture. And we had a German walking about Barbados, trying to market Barbados. And the failure has been this government's failure. It has been. How much damage did that unwise recruitment do to this country? I repeat, tourism is about the sale of a culture. Tourism is not, as the planners always say, not restricted to beaches and buildings. It is about a culture. I repeat, language being at the heart of that culture. A man whose language is foreign to this local language cannot sell this country. And therefore, we are happy to have bid him farewell. Not because we have anything against him, but the minister must remain condemned for misleading Barbadians as to the worth of this gentleman. As to the worth of this gentleman, as to the professional worth of this gentleman, as to the benefit that this gentleman brought to this economy. But you see, this government makes lots of mistakes. Perhaps it is not a mistake because it was a deliberate hiring. I remember well. And I remember saying, but what is this all about? This hate hunt from all the way in the east. And he is brought here, probably seeing Barbados for the first time and hearing the Bajan language, nation language for the first time. And he is made our country's chief salesman of a tourism product. And I ask this government never to make that mistake again. Was it he that spent the $500,000 on a slogan? Because this government does a lot of trade in that figure. Everything is $500,000. Come. We have a lot of $500,000 bills. Come and get one. Some foolish slogan. And we spent $500,000 on foolishness. Now abandoned. Money's not repaid. What kind of contracts we had with these people? A former prime minister would have described this as spectacular incompetence. Spectacular only because it was so glaringly obvious. It lit up the skies and fell in our faces and left us disgraced and ashamed. It is nothing more than the worst display of management of our public resources. It was reckless, it was reckless. And here, while all of this was happening, Jamaica, and we must not be jealous, but Jamaica and Grenada and Antigua and St. Lucia were on the rise, and we were falling. They were outstripping Barbados. And when we hear talk about sharing flights with the other islands, that is not flight sharing. Because under a previous dispensation, not going to call names today, but under a previous dispensation, those London flights left London, came here, stayed here, and went back to London because the airlines were satisfied that this market could satisfy the demand to come to Barbados. Whether you fly on Virgin Atlantic or British Airways, you are sharing that seat next to you with somebody on his way to St. Lucia, maybe Antigua. I don't know. Although I believe Antigua has a direct flight. But we are sharing seats on those two vital airlines with St. Lucia, I believe, and maybe Grenada, I think it is. The Honorable Minister would speak with greater authority. But the point is, our tourism, I hate to say it. As a man who loves his country, I hate to say it. Except that I love the Caribbean no less. But we are losing. We are losing that subtle war that must necessarily exist. They talk about healthy competition. Competitions are not really ever healthy. People tolerate them. Nothing healthy about it. The anxiety that comes with competition. But we're losing. And under this honorable member for St. Michael West Central, who approaches the job with much zeal, when he rises to speak, he will tell this country about the state of things. I never say the state of play. These are not games. This is about people's livelihood. And if our tourism numbers are dropping, our prospects as a country are similarly dropping. I said before and I'll say it again. Barbados is a happy season when the tourism season is on. But of course, we know what is the existential threat, not only to tourism, but to all aspects of this economy, crime. And I'm going to come to crime later in this address, and I'm going to confront it, the issue of crime, with some difficult and unhappy truths. But let us stay for the time being on tourism. Now, there's this thing called, we come back to it, the debt to GDP ratio. In other words, what is the ratio of debt to gross domestic product. I think this country has been misled by this government. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, Your Honor, but I think this government has told the people of Barbados that the debt to GDP ratio used to be 178%. That debt was outstripping gross domestic product in the figure of 178%. In other words, I believe, no economist, that the debt was higher than the gross domestic product. I began by speaking about myths. And I am reliably educated that there is no publication, including the Central Bank report, which has ever stated, I'm informed, I am your student, honorable member for Christchurch East Central, treat me as your student. Good. And if I am wrong, put me in detention. And I am told that it is a myth that the debt to GDP ratio has ever been 178%, that the government has been peddling an untruth. And that it suits the purpose of the government to inflate that debt to GDP ratio for the purpose of claiming a better performance than it has in fact achieved. And unless my information is incorrect, I join in that assertion, merely a student who is willing to be corrected because I have a right to be wrong too. I have a right to be wrong. I have a right to be wrong. I am not ashamed to say that. Humility brings me here. But humility is not weakness. Remember that. Too many people think that humility is weakness to their peril. But I want this government to, as the Americans say, level with the people of Barbados. And to come and confess that that figure of 178% is a myth. And government, I am prepared to be wrong again. Was that figure not correctly stated at 150-something%? But you see, the government is into large and bold promises that they're going to bring the debt to GDP ratio below 100%, but they're borrowing money every month. Every fortnight, this government is borrowing money. I have a right to be wrong. And if you're borrowing all this money, how is the debt to GDP ratio reducing, decreasing? Teacher, I bow to you. And the people of Barbados are in your hands through you, Honorable Mr. Speaker. The people are in your hands. You had the people, the Honorable Member had the people in his hands yesterday for well in excess of 3.5 hours. We come back to you, the best economists in this government, to tell us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But we are charging you, and when I say you, I mean your government, with an inflated figure of debt to GDP ratio. And we charge this government as well with giving an exaggerated figure as to expectations on the lowering of that debt while the government remains on a borrowing rampage. The two cannot be correct. Either you're borrowing a lot of money on the one hand, or you're not borrowing a lot of money and keeping your debt down while your GDP climbs. But of course, the government may believe that it cannot achieve one without the other, that you cannot increase your GDP unless you borrow. That will be a zone of hot contest in future. Because at some point, the government will have to come to a Christian understanding that the internal economy must be explored. And I use the word explored because I did not want to use the word exploited for its emotive connotations. But it is my view that the internal economy is not being explored by this government, and agriculture stands as the prime example. That our Minister of Agriculture has been sent on leave. He has been sent on leave. And as I've said before, I say again, 3% of GDP in terms of agriculture. We are on the path to suicide. What the economists, I think it was Beckford or one of the political economists called Econocide. We are in danger. And I said in a previous speech, and I say again, food insecurity will not be announced with a bang. It will come upon us as a whimper, as has been happening in this country over the last few weeks and months, that every other weekend or every other fortnight, there is some significant shortage of food, whether it is eggs or milk or sweet potatoes. We are visited with these intermittent shortages of vital foods. And as I said before, and I say again, you can have all the hotels, the 6 of them, being constructed simultaneously. If your agriculture is suffering, we all suffer. And the builders of those hotels will abandon those hotels, and moreover will abandon this country and return from whence they came, and we will be left here with concrete and no soil. That is the state, Your Honor, of this economy. I think it was Mark Twain. Some people attribute the quote to Disraeli. Their lies, damn lies, and statistics. And quite often that sums up a government's treatment of its economic reviews. That you can reduce, as a good technocrat, everything to statistics. And that those statistics will sound very, very good. And you will add to the statistics the language of bounty. And the people out there, they're not feeling this bounty. They're not experiencing this bounty. They're unhappy. They're unhappy. And they're unhappy sometimes because they're hungry. I'm sorry to say that. And when you have a population that is unhappy and hungry, the pressure is placed on a government to do 2 things: to tell the truth and to work on those truths, those harsh truths. And this government has failed in both regards. The government is failing to confront truth. And as demonstrated in this report yesterday, the government may be failing in terms of telling the truth to the people of this country. I've said that is not personal. That is an objective assessment. That is valid and legitimate political commentary in response to what we heard yesterday. So when a government boasts about improved ratings, that we are moving up, we are still at junk status. Have the people been told that? When you tell the people that the ratings agencies are elevating us, must you not also tell the people of Barbados that the rating agencies have failed to tell us that we have not moved beyond junk status? I heard the minister yesterday, the honorable member for Christchurch East Central, read a table of debt servicing. I have a commitment to the truth, and as a party, we will have to examine that. I am the leader, but I am not a despot. And we like to subject things to what we call teamwork. And if any of you were to have my experience, you would find yourselves introduced to something, a foreign concept, a concept that is foreign to you. It's called teamwork, where you assemble your good intellects and you do what is called brainstorm, and you come up with the answers to your questions. And what the people of this country need to be told is that this government has not been altogether candid on the question of interest rates. On the question of interest rates, which become a part of government's obligation to its lenders, has this government been candid? In other words, has this government offered full disclosure as to possibly the perilous state of its debt obligations? Are we living on borrowed time? Or are we borrowing some time from our hapless children and grandchildren? And if not borrowing time, are we taking time from them? And if not taking time from them, are we taking prosperity from them? No wonder you will find that most of our young people, and I've said before and I say it again, one of the tragedies of modern life in Barbados is that we have lost so many of our bright young people. And we used to lose our bright young people on the basis of temporary sojourns in the metropolitan domains. But this group is telling you that they're not coming back here, perhaps on holiday, and tragically to a funeral. But we are raising a generation in this country that is not feeling that commitment to this society. And that is a tragedy. And we as members of this generation, this present political generation of all colors, must join and take joint responsibility. We must take joint responsibility. But I wonder if this government is taking its portion of that joint responsibility. But the lawyers will tell you that if it is joint, it is also not severable. But I ask this government, as in relation to crime, take responsibility for the tragedy of young life in Barbados. I come to the issue of debt restructuring. And I said earlier that I promised the minister that I would make available to him. I'm not going to make this a document of the House. I don't have the details, but this is just for his edification. The article is called Debt Swaps. Are we robbing Peter to pay Paul? It is by Dr. Juliet Melville.
You're quoting from an honorable member?
No, I'm not. I'm just calling the name so that...
you know the procedure.
I'm not going to quote, sir. The honorable member will locate it. And she is a former director of the economics department at the Caribbean Development Bank and a former lecturer at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. and I hope that her CV is impressive. But I commend to the honorable member for Christchurch East Central some contact with that article by Dr. Juliet Melville. I believe she exists. And she wrote on the perilous state of NIS. Not for the quarter, sir.
I hope
Not
you
for the
don't.
quarter. Not for the quarter.
Honorable member, if you want to quote, you can quote and just make it a document of yours.
But I don't have the date. I don't have the.
But there's no peril in quoting, honorable, unless if you have the important information, the requisite information, you can quote as long as you make it a document of the House.
I am guided by the chair, sir. And so I will make this article a document of the House. Debt swaps, are we robbing Peter to pay Paul, by Dr. Juliet Melville. And I will just excise.
An article from a newspaper, honorable
But
member.
that is why I did not wish to.
So you ought not to then, if that's the
Yes,
case.
I will leave that.
Yes.
And this will become a private professional transaction between the honorable member and myself. And he will go and read it. He knows where to find it. You find it on the internet probably. And she has said some very interesting things about the state of our debt. And she has said even more interesting things about these debt swaps that we came in here and boasted about a few months ago above my head. So I had to go away and consult the experts. And I'm not going to offend the procedure of this House.
I would not allow you, sir.
Indeed not, sir. But from my own, I will say to you what I extrapolate from that document, that the South Coast Water Reclamation Facility, that document is there. You have my honest approach to this. I made some notes. That the government claims it is saving money, and this is on the South Coast Water Reclamation Facility matter in the amount of $140 million, which the government said at the time would be government's largest project, sewage. Government is very proud of that. And she says that the government claims it is saving money, but in reality,
You tell me you extrapolate, you know.
I'm
So
extrapolating.
if you have to extrapolate means you got to use your own words.
Yes, my own words.
No, you can't say what she said. You
Okay.
are extrapolating.
Let me extrapolate then.
do that.
Thank you, sir.
But we're not
You're very
quoting
kind.
her. But not by quoting her. You extrapolated, sir.
Let
You
me
interpreting.
extrapolate.
Armor means you're interpreting. You can interpret, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, you can interpret.
Yes, let me interpret and extrapolate, or extrapolate and then interpret.
Yes.
Yes.
Without using her words, though.
Without using her words.
Thanks.
That the NIS is really leaking funds in this debt swap arrangement. That it has not been as advantageous to the people of Barbados as was sold in this chamber. That somebody is losing. Somebody is sacrificing. And it seems that in this country, the sacrificial lamb must always be the NIS. The Poor People's Bank. The Poor People's Bank, raided by White Oak to the extent of $1.3 billion. And now this debt swap arrangement is raiding the NIS to the extent of $400 million, $1.7 billion. All told, that the NIS has had to sacrifice the financial arrangements. Is that why the people of this country in the public service are being forced to retire at 67? Is that why, Your Honor? I call it the poor man's bank. Why, even at the level of a security fund, must the poor man make the sacrifice? You ever saw any rich person in at the NIS, sir? Asking for help? No. So in addition to the Barbados government now making itself Barbados's most famous bank robber. They're heading back to the NIS to rob the NIS. And to result in the poor people of this country, civil servants. A man goes into the public service at the age of 18. And 49 years later, he can retire. 49 years later, Your Honor, that's not fair. That's not civilized. That is not a socialist country. That is not a socialist country or a country that models itself on the socialism of Scandinavia. And this is an exchange that the Honorable Member for St. Michael South and I had recently in here. But perhaps we don't have the resources of those Scandinavian countries. But the point is, our NIS is being made the sacrificial lamb in too many of government's shrouded, I'm going to use neutral language, shrouded financial arrangements. And so White Oak came down here and told this government, look, reduce NIS's indebtedness, or the government's indebtedness, by $1.3 billion. And in this debt swap, again, they hit the NIS. That's not fair, sir. That is not fair. So, Your Honor, it is my position, it is our party's position that we are borrowing too much money. Government is claiming that the economy has stabilized. If the economy has stabilized, why are we going back for these loans all the time? If it has stabilized, why are we back on the people's doorstep like Sharkey? Some of them are here too young to know Sharkey. The Honorable Member for St. Thomas is well familiar with Sharkey. We are back on the people's doorstep looking to borrow again and again and again. Every trip out of this country, the only report card we bring him back is that we borrowed more money. And if the economy has stabilized, why must we go back? If it has stabilized, you use the existing foreign exchange that you borrowed to generate itself within the economy. In other words, do what you say the loan was designed for. But you don't come and put it like a warm egg in a nest and just look at it and say you have an egg. Let it hatch. And let it grow into a chicken. Pardon the metaphor. But there's no report from this government that we're doing that. There's no report from this government that these loans are going into productive sectors. That's the point, Honorable Member, through you, sir. And so we heard yesterday, and we've been hearing for the last few weeks, that this economy has stabilized, and we heard yesterday the more emotive and exciting language that there is bunky. I think one of the newspapers may have carried it as a headline today. I hope they carried it tongue-in-cheek and with sarcasm, as opposed to joining the government in this exaggerated language. There's no bounty around here. None. If there were bounty around here, this budget would not now be characterized by its appeal to pedicures and cornflakes. Well, I've never heard the likes of this. I've never heard the likes of this. People have come to budget day and budget speeches prepared for academic interventions and for structural attention to the economy, not corn curves and pedicures. and telling people, boasting to people, and people thumping the desk that you've given them $1.36 more? $1.36 more? What does decency do in the face of insult? Du Bois asked. That's an insult to the intelligence of Barbadians. But Barbadians will remain decent all the same. And Barbadians will remain patient all the same. This government is now characterized by its overspending. And I will come very shortly to the areas of that overspending at the risk that I will make Barbadians angry. But I'm not here to make Barbadians angry, I'm here to tell the truth. And if Barbadians now find that the truth makes them angry, I am prepared to join them and become angry as well. Let me move quickly to education. In the estimates that precede these debates, education is always the area that receives highest allocation, and that's because that is consistent with what I said earlier, that the most successful and the most significant revolution in this country, not a shot was fired. A shot was fired at injustice, and injustice lost, because the poor people's children in this country got a chance that generations of poor people never before had. Does this government understand the significance of that revolution? Does this government understand that you do not tamper with the results of that revolution unless you do so carefully, and carefully means in consultation with the people? Does this government understand that? Does this government understand that, as I have told the honorable member for St. James South before, who probably even now is not comprehending, that her constituency and a significant part of her constituency is evidence of the success of education? And I'm prepared to educate her as to what I mean. That in 1970, it was a place where the Scout Jamboree was held, 70, 71, around there, Dunks Trees, and before that, Canes. Look at it now. Those are the results of the education revolution in this country. And I hope the honorable member knows that, and I won't tell her again because she may now translate it into electoral results, but those will be futile. Because unless you understand that, you will not meet success there. And that is what education did in this country. I want to tell a story about education. I'm on the subject of education. I wish I could call his name. A few weeks ago, I had a telephone call from a gentleman. I'll just say he lives in St. Peter. And in 1961, September 1961, I believe his father went and paid $8.50 at Courage Parish School. This is something that Barbadians need to hear. This is something that young Barbadians need to hear. These are stories that young Barbadians need to hear, so that when they interpret their struggle, they must understand that their parents and grandparents had a more intense struggle than they do now. And if they understand that, they would be less likely to incline themselves to deviance. Because the life of people, the majority of people in this country, is largely a life of struggle. And 1961 alleviated that struggle, fundamentally and in a revolutionary way. And that gentleman telephoned me and told me in September 1961, his father went and paid the $8.50 to Courage Parish. And as life goes, his father emigrated to England and communicated with his mother and his aunt. Hate to be bringing the gentleman's business into public domains, but I believe that he would support this testimony on his behalf, and not only on his behalf, but on behalf of a generation. That's why people in this country feel so warmly towards Mr. Errol Walton Barrow. A natural warmth. And his father went away and informed his mother, look, I've started a new life, and I cannot any longer support the young man. And he told me his mother said some words he would never forget. She said, if I have to suck salt, you're staying in school. And the school was, they used to call it the Parry, Courage Parry. She said, if I have to suck salt, you staying in there. Except that she had no idea where the $8.50 was going to come from. The economists can convert the value of $8.50 into modern currency, and it will come to more than $1,000. Believe it or not, young people. And in September, I beg your pardon, after the term started, His Excellency Errol Walton Barrow, after a conversation with Sir James Cameron Tudor, at the time James Cameron Tudor, Education Minister, enacted that education, secondary education, would no longer be a privilege, but it became a right. And that the poor people's children in this country no longer had to pay $8.50, which converted to modern currency is a large amount of money. And he walked in, and they used to call it the governing body. He walked into the governing body the following January and received that $8.50 back. And that was his moment in liberation. He became a principal of a school in this country. And that is why people feel so warmly towards that patriarch. And it is not my peculiar political expedition that will go on trial here, but it is an objective statement in the revolution called education that happened in this country in 1961. And all Barbadians, including the members of this parliament who don't understand it, must be brought to a stage in which they understand it. And when this government threatens to dismantle a system that this government does not understand, then this government must stand condemned for betraying the interests of people in this country. They don't understand it, and I'm not saying this government does not understand it. This government does not understand the institution that it is threatening to dismantle, and they can't touch it unless its beneficiaries and the children and grandchildren of its beneficiaries have an input. And this government's sin has been the sin of a lack of consultation with the people of this country as to that thing we call 11+. It is sacred, but it is not perfect. That it is sacred does not mean that it is perfect. And in its imperfection, the government has an obligation and a responsibility to openly communicate with its beneficiaries and its potential beneficiaries as to its usefulness. There are problems. There are problems in the primary schools. A child fails an 11+ exam. He doesn't fail that exam on that morning. He has been failing from the time he was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. His failure has been daily, weekly, and yearly. I repeat, it is sacred, and it was sacred, but it is not perfect. And it must not be a subject for callous dismantling unless the people who are invested in that scheme, in that system, are given fair opportunity to say how they feel about it. And that has been this government's failure. That this government has not consulted with the people of this country. And most of all, I remember one day hearing that the government invited the teachers under Tenka Kefil to consult on something that the government had already decided. No wonder the teachers rejected it. I am on education.
Honorable member,
Beg your pardon, sir.
is this appropriate time as it relates to a break? Honorable member?
Indeed, Your Honor. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 8:15 p.m.
Questions that this honorable chamber be suspended until 8:15 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 8:15 p.m.